Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Madrid Rusidov. I want to show you what I can do. I'm a little bit before time. I'm going to put live TV that I've never watched before. Okay, this is streaming through the Australian stations, and I'll just show you my actions, and I'll leave their voices and their whatever their footage. I've never watched this before. You can watch it live on your TVs in Australia if you want. As I'm filming this in Melbourne, make sure we're on the right channel, eh? Okay, no worries. I'll strut my stuff. It is live TV. I'll just switch on the TV. I'll show you. The date is, it's live. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. I'll just show you this, just normal TV. Just having a problem with my system. Hang on, I'll get right back to you. But I'll show you. I'll show you what I can do anyway. Okay, live TV.
So what are we gonna do tonight? Watching? I had an inkling.
You guys ready for that?
Oh, look at it! Oh my god.
Family Rules, Wednesdays 8:30 on NITV and on demand.
Oh, real sidekick guy. Look. 11%. So very warm, very dry, and extremely windy across that region at the moment. Those winds extend across most of the southeast.
I'm hoping something live will come on, so I can show you what I can do. I don't even know this stuff. I've never watched it. I don't watch much. I don't watch much TV. But you can watch me, and I'll show you. I'm just a little bit ahead of time.
This area indicates the regions under a severe weather warning for damaging winds. We're expecting heavy rainfall tonight about the northeast, but tomorrow we start to see that shift down the east coast into the southeastern corner as a deep low pressure system moves a little bit further south and closer to Tasmania. Then it gradually starts to move away later in the day. Now that's maintaining very strong winds in New South Wales, Victoria and Tasmania tomorrow. We're seeing this cold southerly flow maintaining snow about the alpine areas of New South Wales and Victoria, but in both those states, those snow levels rise relatively quickly through the day and it should clear by Saturday. It's not that unusual to see snow at this time of year across those regions. We have actually had widespread snow on Christmas Day. That was back in 2006. But the winds will stay very strong across the Hunter region tomorrow. We'll start to see them begin to ease off as we move into Saturday. And in Western Australia, we've got a trough, bringing the potential of some showers and thunderstorms. That potential for Perth remains quite low, though. They are more likely in just southern areas of the southwest land division. Still a fairly cool day for Melbourne and Hobart. Plenty of showers about and those heavy falls to begin with through the eastern parts of Tasmania. Strong and gusty winds in Sydney. They'll persist through the Hunter region. And we've also got very hot conditions for Alice Springs.
Thanks, Graham. I'll be back with the top stories in just a moment, including the latest on the government's moves to strip Australian citizenship from anyone convicted of terror offences. The latest on that bushfire burning north of Newcastle, plus more on the New South Wales dust storm. Stay with us.
Know the story anytime, anywhere. ABC News Channel is streaming live right now on iView.
Tomorrow on News Breakfast, the one and only Guy Sebastian. He's dropping in for a chat and a very special performance of his new single, Before I Go.
And Victorians are preparing to vote in the state election. We'll hear from both leaders as they make their final pitches. Lots to talk about. See you then.
Australia's #1 dedicated news channel.
For a different take on what's got us talking, don't miss a beat on the drum. Then know the story with all the latest headlines from around the country.
Facts matter more than opinions. Join me as we take a deeper look into the big issues affecting us all.
Plus, we pick apart all the day's business and finance news. And we'll bring you the stories that shape our world from every corner of the globe.
The latest news and analysis, weeknights on ABC News Channel.
St Kilda's notorious Gatwick Hotel will now finally close its doors.
Before it was the block, it gave hope to the hopeless.
There's just nowhere for them to go.
Two sisters dedicate their lives, caring for the forgotten.
People think it's all drugs and alcohol and everything else. It's not.
I love the joint.
Gatwick, the Last Chance Hotel.
Bit of a love story, really. Yes, definitely a love story.
Tuesday 9:20 on ABC and iView.
Australia's most trusted news.
The world is in shock.
I am sorry.
It isn't truth. Truth isn't truth.
You've always been there with us. And we're always there with you when and where you want it.
Now to some breaking news. Well, stay with us.
Know the real story anytime with ABC News Online.
Today, the government unveils changes to terrorism laws, making it easier to strip Australian citizenship from people convicted of terrorism offences.
If you're
convicted in our courts of a terrorist-related offence, you can expect to leave our country.
Supporters of David Eastman welcome his not guilty verdict 30 years after the murder of one of Australia's top cops. Labor pledges billions in renewable energy investment under its new plan. And dust clouds stretching for hundreds of kilometres shroud New South Wales. Welcome to ABC News. I'm Kirsten Aiken. Those stories in a moment, but first to a developing story this afternoon. Is in control bushfire burning towards Saltash north of Newcastle. The New South Wales Rural Fire Service says the fire may impact on properties in the next hour. People in the Saltash area are advised to seek shelter as it is now too late to leave. We'll keep you updated on the situation throughout the afternoon. There is, of course, severe weather conditions underway right now. Our own weather specialist, Graham Creed, was just mentioning strong wind gusts in excess of 80 kilometres an hour in that area, very humid and dry conditions, and we hope to be able to speak to the RFS very shortly. Now, the Morrison government is seeking an urgent upgrade in national security laws to thwart terrorism plots and attacks. The Prime Minister wants stronger powers to strip dual nationals of their Australian citizenship, and he wants to fast-track powers to unlock the digital communications of terrorists. National Affairs correspondent Greg Jennett has more from Parliament House.
The authorities are at very high tempo, at the very least in Victoria, but perhaps elsewhere, foiling terrorist plots at present. So there was the successful attack in Burke Street, then this week's arrest of 3 Australians of Turkish ancestry, and all were said to be inspired in some way by Islamic State in planning their violence, whether it was perpetrated or ultimately prevented. So one of the main measures the government wants to work on here is increasing Peter Dutton's ability to strip a convicted terrorist of their Australian citizenship if it's thought that they either have or could be eligible for the citizenship of another country. Of course, it's never possible to render anyone stateless if they are only citizens of one country, but if it was thought that a convicted terrorist, regardless of how long they've been sentenced to jail, if it's thought that that person could have or could get the citizenship of another country, then Peter Dutton, as Home Affairs Minister, would, under this proposal, simply issue an order to cancel their Australian citizenship, and it then follows that they would be deported from this country at the end of their sentence.
We are finding that many of the individuals of concern are people who have, at some point, Australian citizenship conferred on them, or they've been born here as second or third generation members of families that have migrated earlier. And so we are dealing about the issue of Australian citizenship and how we treat those people, as the Prime Minister points out, who have betrayed their country, who have surrendered what it means to be an Australian citizen through their actions, seeking to blow up or to cause harm to other Australians is unacceptable, of course. So what we've been able to do through the legislation so far, and I can update the figures today, is to increase the number of cancellations from 6 to 9, so 9 people through their own actions.
And so, Greg, what about foreign fighters? What does the government have in mind to handle Australians who might want to return to this country after waging a jihad?
Yes, well, at the height of the fighting in Syria, Kirsten, a regime of legal controls were put in place. There were no-go areas around Al-Raqqa and other hot parts of that jihad. But evidently, with 100 known foreign fighters still abroad, it's apparent that ASIO and other authorities, including the federal police, are obviously monitoring them and concerned that they might come back. So what the government is now proposing is a suite of laws. It's not clear by that these have been fully drafted, would make it into the Parliament within a fortnight. Nevertheless, a suite of laws that borrow on ideas from the UK, and they would be called temporary exclusion orders. They would apply for up to 2 years. So you can't come back. You're excluded from Australia for 2 years. If you do come back, then you will fall under a regime of control and monitoring that could include curfews or electronic braceleting and constant surveillance by that measure, as well as some sort of intrusive, I imagine, surveillance on your electronic communications as well. So that's one for the future. It just may not be legislated this year, Kirsten.
Well, just on your last point, the Prime Minister appears anxious to give extra electronic surveillance powers to authorities. How is he going to speed that up?
Yes, so this is what we call the encryption bill. It was introduced, Kirsten, to the Parliament in September. And because it's a national security law, it went, as all bills do in this area, to the Joint Intelligence Committee of the Parliament. Now, they've been dealing with this methodically. They were going to hold some hearings and then write a report, maybe make some suggestions on ways to improve that bill. That bill, by the way, would give agencies like ASIO the ability to say to Apple or to WhatsApp or to other communications platforms, please help us make access, force access into a suspect's phone under warrant and be able to see the contents of their communication.
Well, let's get an update on the fire situation now near Saltash in New South Wales. I'm joined on the phone by spokesperson at the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, Greg Allen. Greg, what is your understanding of the situation there?
Kirsten, thanks for the time this afternoon. That fire can fail is at emergency warning, as you mentioned, and it's burning around that area to the west of Saltash. Now, the fire has crossed Medowee Road, and it's burning under pretty strong winds towards the Saltash area. It is still out of control, and the fire may impact properties in the next hour. Emergency alert telephone warnings have been sent to homes in the area, with the advice that if you are in the area of Saltash, it's now too late to leave. Seek shelter as the firefighter arrives and protect yourself from the heat of the fire. Now, if you're not in the area, you may not be able to safely return due to the fact that Richardson Road and Medowee Road is also closed at the moment.
Tell us about the crews fighting this blaze. Are they fighting it from the air as well as the ground?
Yeah, that's correct. Our firefighters on the ground are being assisted by our aircraft, including a large air tanker. Now, we've got 4 large air providing that support from the air. And I might just mention as well that there has been another fire that's been escalated to the emergency warning level, and that fire is the Hospital Road fire, just southwest of Cessnock. That Hospital Road fire is now at the emergency warning level as well.
Greg, we've been talking all day about the severe weather conditions across the southeast. Strong winds blowing dust from drought-stricken areas over eastern parts. Our weather specialist Graham Creed has been talking about those strong winds in the past hour in the area of the Salt Ash fire, exceeding 80 kilometres an hour. What does your forecast say for the afternoon about how the weather conditions might impact those fire grounds?
Yeah, sure, Kirsten. They are experiencing very strong winds on those fire grounds, especially in that area around Salt Ash, where that fire is currently burning. And at this stage, it looks like those strong winds will continue into the evening. So firefighters have got to battle with a bit this afternoon. They're doing their very best, as I mentioned, being assisted by the aircraft, including those large air tankers. But certainly with those conditions not resting for some time, it will be quite the battle ahead over the next few hours.
All right, Greg Allen, thank you for the update. And we'll just let our audience know that we will continue to follow developments there and let you know of them throughout the afternoon. Federal Labor has unveiled the new energy policy it will take to the next election. It includes subsidies for household batteries to improve storage and borrows a plan dumped by Malcolm Turnbull before he lost the top job. Political reporter Jane Norman has more.
Labor saw the light on solar years ago.
The rest of the world's going down this track.
Now, on the verge of an election, it's putting renewables firmly at the heart of its policy.
It's obviously the answer to the challenge of climate change.
Labor's offering some households a $2,000 rebate to install batteries, which would store energy from rooftop solar. A $200 million investment to improve reliability and bring down power prices.
They can save, according to the industry, between 60 and 90% off their household bills.
Households are just part of the plan. Labor will apply renewables nationwide, and it's promising to pour billions into new projects, whether they be solar, wind, hydro or gas.
The single most important thing about energy and climate policy is to have one.
In developing this policy, Labor's sought to minimise a coalition scare campaign.
There will be no carbon tax.
So it's adopted the party's National Energy Guarantee, which was widely supported by industry.
The National Energy Guarantee is not the scheme that we would have designed. We've never said it was perfect.
The key difference lies in the ambition. Labor's aiming to cut emissions by 45% by 2030. The Coalition's target remains at 26%.
This is looking pretty robust. The question will be around, can Labor provide a compelling narrative around how much this will cost?
We would never adopt those targets. They are reckless and they'll be a wrecking ball through the economy.
After a decade of bitter debate, the idea of a carbon price in the energy sector is effectively dead. But Labor's got other high-emitting industries in its sights, flagging an emissions trading scheme in the manufacturing and gas sectors to help share the load and ultimately reach its ambitious target. Jane Norman, ABC News, Canberra.
David Eastman, who spent nearly 20 years in jail over the killing of one of the country's top cops, has been found not guilty of the murder after a retrial. A jury determined Mr Eastman did not murder senior Australian Federal Police Officer Colin Winchester nearly 3 decades ago. Our reporter Elizabeth Byrne has been following the case and was in the courtroom for the verdict.
It was quite tense, actually. There were lots of people there. There's been people dropping in all the time, but today all of them came along and some more. Some of them were court staff, of course, but there were quite a few police who'd been watching the trial. Some of them were sort of being the fresh eyes over the trial, so to speak. There were also a few lawyers and, of course, lots of journalists. And so everybody was sort of quite anxious to see what this verdict would be after 7 days of waiting. David Eastman was in the dock for the first time. He's been allowed to sit in the back of the court behind his lawyers for most of the trial, but today he was where everybody else has to sit. He looked very nervous. His lip seemed to quiver a bit when the jury announced the not guilty verdict, and he was a very relieved man indeed.
Well, what were the issues that the jury had to weigh up?
Well, the prosecution took this case to a retrial on the grounds they said they had a very strong circumstantial case against David Eastman. They took that angle because the first trial was found to have been a miscarriage of justice because the forensic evidence in it was found to be deeply flawed. It's specifically evidence which linked David Eastman's car to the scene. It was found that evidence wasn't accurate at all. So the prosecution was left with its circumstantial case, which was that David Eastman had had an argument with or had differed with Colin Winchester. He had made threats, had been buying guns. The police even said that he'd made confessions on tapes, although that was a very controversial piece of evidence. On the other side, the defence argued that the police should have looked more closely at other people who had Colin Winchester in their sights, including the mafia over some drug investigations. And basically they told the jury that that the mafia had the means and the motive to have carried out the crime. And ultimately the jury must have decided that it preferred that version.
Elizabeth, has the family of Colin Winchester responded to today's verdict?
Well, they have issued a very short written statement, which thanks the people who are involved in the investigation and the prosecution. But a spokesman for the family, John Hinchy, who used to be the ACT's Commissioner for Victims of Crime, he's spoken to the family a lot over the years, and he spoke outside the court about what they must be going through.
30 years next January, Elizabeth. Colin Winchester was murdered. That's a long time to carry not only grief, but 2 trials, a full commission of inquiry, appeal to the federal court, an appeal to the High Court. They've been through hell and back, I would imagine. The justice system is a very difficult system for victims to participate in and to experience. And they've had nearly, well, as I said, Colin was assassinated 30 years ago.
The 8-year-old man has been charged with the murder of his daughter, who washed up on a Gold Coast beach on Monday. The man was extradited from Queensland to New South Wales overnight and faced court this morning. Jennifer Huxley reports.
The man was held here at the Tweed Heads police station overnight and appeared in local court this morning via video link. He's been charged with the murder of his 9-month-old baby daughter, whose body washed up at Surfers Beach in the early hours of Monday morning. Police will allege that the child died here in New South Wales. Divers have been searching the Tweed River and Jack Evans Boat Harbour as they try to learn more about how the child got into the water. In the Tweed Heads local court today, the baby's father, who can't be named for legal reasons, was refused bail and was not required to enter a plea. The results of an autopsy on the child's body are yet to be completed. The matter has been adjourned until late February.
A Queensland woman charged over the strawberry contamination saga will be released on bail. Christian Silver reports.
50-year-old Mai Ut Trin was arrested earlier this month after a police investigation into more than 180 needles being found in strawberries across the country. Miss Trin worked at the Berrylicious farm north of Brisbane and was charged with 7 counts of contaminating goods. Today, prosecutors said DNA evidence from a needle showed it was 100 billion times more likely to have come from Miss Trin than anyone else. The police evidence also includes a conversation Miss Trin had with a farm worker, where she's alleged to have said, "If I hate anyone, I will put the needle in the strawberry and make them go bankrupt." But her lawyer said the case was circumstantial and there was no proof that she inserted anything into the fruit. If found guilty, Ms Trin faces a maximum 10 years in prison.
Given the amount of attention that the matter has garnered, let's respect some privacy at this particular moment in time.
Ms Trin was granted bail and will have to surrender her passport and report to police 3 times a week. The case was adjourned until next month.
Bali 9 drug smuggler Renee Lawrence has arrived back in Newcastle after more than a decade in an Indonesian prison. Lawrence was arrested in 2005 when she was caught at Bali Airport with 2.7 kilograms of heroin strapped to her body. Our reporter Ben Millington has more from Newcastle Airport.
There were chaotic scenes here at Newcastle Airport this morning as Renee Lawrence touched down just after 11 o'clock. There was a large media contingent waiting to see her first steps on home soil in New South Wales here in Newcastle. When she arrived, the press was unable to get any questions to her because as soon as she came through the arrival gate, she dropped her head and crash tackled through the awaiting media scrum and then ran towards the exit. It was a fairly chaotic scene with a number of cameramen and snappers falling over as they tried to pursue her. She then got in a waiting car and put a towel over her head while her family waited to collect her luggage. It's obviously been a long 24 hours for Renee Lawrence, who left Bali some time ago, arrived in Brisbane at 5 a.m. and faced the media there as well. It's understood that she's made her way now probably to her parents, one of her parents' house, both of them living in the Newcastle suburb of Wallsend, where it's expected she's probably going to try and lay low and avoid the media attention. Of course, there is one matter that is it will be on her mind, and that is 2 outstanding arrest warrants from New South Wales Police, which relate to an incident where she allegedly was involved in a high-speed chase in a stolen car up the Pacific Highway before she went to Bali on that fateful trip in 2005. Police have confirmed that she won't be arrested immediately on those warrants, and this is a matter that will be dealt with Renee Lawrence and her legal team. But for now, no doubt Renee Lawrence is happy to be home, the first of the Bali 9 to return to Australia.
It's now just 2 days until Victorians head to the polls, and the Premier and Opposition Leader are making their final pitches to voters. And the Drum is taking an in-depth look at what's at stake in this weekend's Victorian election. Host Julia Baird joins us now from Melbourne. Hello to you. What is coming up on tonight's show?
Well, let not the tranquility of the Yarra behind me distract you, Kirsten, from the fact that we are preparing a show tonight, 2 days out from the Victorian election. We have lawyer Nigel Nguyen, we have CEO of the Victorian Indigenous Childcare Agency, Muriel Famblett, Melbourne Lord Mayor, and we also have the Vice President of the local Liberal Party, Karina Ockertell. And we're going to be talking about what are the issues that are shaping this election Will it come down to law and order as the coalition has been trying to, or will it in fact end up with rest?
It sounds like a good panel because there has been a focus on law and order and population in the lead up to the vote.
Yes, very much so, and certainly that's been pushed by the opposition. There's been a debate about the Burke Street attacker, and again about the fact that he was out on bail. Look, it's been a time, as the ALP has been arguing in the Premier, that they need to tackle more of the root causes when it comes to, for example, funding TAFE positions and also tackling the question of homelessness and domestic and family violence.
And Julia, leadership debates, who's been performing well?
Well, look, the reaction really across the media today seemed to be that there wasn't really that much impact. There was no real surprises, except perhaps the extent of the animosity between the two leaders. Overall, you know, I mean, the Premier is looking reasonably confident at this point, but we have to remember that there are 17 seats within the polling margin of error. So it could really be a minority government. It could go a number of ways at this point. So there's certainly going to be a lot of last-minute scrambling. But what a fascinating thing is that the polls are showing that the view of the public has not been dramatically shifted by the Burke Street incident. So it'll be interesting to see how much law and order does actually influence the minds of the population here in a state where 2/3 of the people think that population is happening too fast. There's a lot more of a concern in infrastructure, in roads, in transport, in trains and rail links, and that could end up really being what decides people's votes on Saturday, Kirst.
Well, we look forward to seeing you later. Thanks, Julia.
Okay, thanks, Kirst.
And you can catch the drum at 5:15 on the ABC main channel and an hour later here on the ABC News channel. Here now with the day's business news. Alicia, let's go first to the Banking Royal Commission. What's happening there?
Well, the focus this afternoon has moved from the bank bosses to the regulators, and the fairly new boss of ASIC, being the corporate watchdog James Shipton, has defended his relationships with the banks that he regulates under questioning by Rowena Orr QC. Now, the hearing has heard that since 2016, ASIC has had an enhanced engagement program that involves more than 50 meetings and a year with boards and senior executives of those financial institutions. Now, James Shipton says the engagement also extends to regular phone calls, and he says during those phone discussions, he didn't hold back raising his concerns.
What have you called CEOs to express dissatisfaction about?
Expressed dissatisfaction on a number of occasions as regards to handling of particular matters that are being handled by our enforcement teams. I have spoken at meetings about my dissatisfaction about what I call legal trench warfare. I have also expressed my dissatisfaction to these leaders about the lack of professionalism in the Australian financial sector. And I've also spoken to these leaders, to a man and a woman, about the fact that I believe that they have forgotten that they are dealing with other people's money.
So it's likely many in the gallery there will be speculating about which man or woman that he was referring to there at the top of the banks. Now, once Ms. Orr had established that there are regular meetings between the institutions it regulates and ASIC, Mr. Shipton on the nature of those relationships between the ASIC commissioners and the senior executives, and here's how he has responded.
I would not clarify them as get-togethers. I would clarify them as meetings.
I see. What is the difference there, Mr. Shipton?
Well, just in my own interpretation, and maybe I'm being pedantic, so apologies, I would just, I get together, I personally interpret, and maybe it's my own personal interpretation, as a more familiar, more social gathering, and I just wanted to clarify in my own mind that I have very structured, I aim to have very structured form.
And he said that you also speak more frequently than that in a less structured way. Is that correct?
Well, less structured way, my take of the less structured communication with Mr. Common is that we often speak by phone. Often pre-market, as I said, because Mr. Common is giving us, as a markets regulator, the heads up of a market announcement which is coming the next day. That's important for us as a market regulator, but it's also very important for us to business developments inside a financial institution as important as the Commonwealth Bank.
Mr. Shipton has also conceded that ASIC needs to take more enforcement action, and of course that was one of the major criticisms that came out of Kenneth Hayne, the Commissioner's interim report, which was released a month or two ago.
Now, it's been a rough week for investors. How has the market finished up today?
Much better than it has on any other day of this week, which is good news for investors, I suppose, if you're needing a bit of a bounce on the share market. It did rise back from a 21-month low, clawing back some of its recent heavy losses. By the close, the All Ordinaries Index added 0.8% and the ASX 200 Index was up 0.9%. Checking the movers now, and Mineral Resources was the standout performer today, jumping nearly 20%. Lithium operations that helped other miners in the sector. Galaxy Resources up 9.2%. Heading in the opposite direction, though, was Infigen Energy, along with the food group Costa Group, and down off for a second day after spinning off its coal supermarkets into a separate listed entity. Turning across the region, and it is a bit of a mixed session. We're seeing modest losses across China. The Nikkei in Japan managing a gain of around 0.5%, and a similar to close it. Wall Street partially recovered from a brutal sell-off, which had seen its main indices erase all the gains they'd made in 2018. In the final hour of trade, though, the momentum on US markets did slow, and the Dow ended the day flat. The benchmark S&P was up 0.33%, while a bounce in tech shares propelled the Nasdaq higher by almost 1%. Spot gold prices are currently fairly flat in the Asian session. Crude oil prices have bounced from 2017 lows, and the Australian dollar is currently sitting at around 72.5 US cents, where it's been for most of the day. And that is the latest from the Business and Finance Desk for now.
Thanks, Alicia. Well, a dust storm that blanketed the west of New South Wales is impacting the Greater Sydney region. The Bureau of Meteorology is reporting the haze will remain over Sydney for the rest of the afternoon. A cold front and dry soil conditions have generated dust clouds stretching as long as 500 kilometres. They're dissipating with weaker than expected winds. Sydney-siders have taken to social media to post their videos and images of the beginning of the storm. And the Office of Environment and Heritage has issued a very poor air quality warning over eastern parts of the state. Health authorities are urging people with respiratory conditions to stay indoors as the dust storm makes its way east. Well, let's check the latest weather now. And firefighters are facing some difficult weather conditions in the Hunter Valley this afternoon.
Yeah, they are. 2 emergency bushfires across that region. We're seeing very strong wind gusts, very low relative humidity across the Hunter region as well, and temperatures sitting around the high 20s at the moment. Those conditions should abate a little bit overnight as far as wind strengths go, but we're actually expecting to see the potential of winds even stronger as we move through tomorrow. Now, all those strong winds are associated with a low pressure system. There's one over Victoria that's weakening, but there's another one to the northeast of Tasmania, and that's actually strengthening at the moment. And it's responsible for a swathe of wind warnings across the southeastern states. Now, broad area of New South Wales. This is a combination of a severe thunderstorm warning. Those thunderstorms are moving into the ranges. They've already produced some wind gusts in excess of 80 kilometres per hour about the Southern Highlands in New South Wales. We're also looking at the potential they could push a little bit further east. But then tomorrow, a deepening low pressure system is going to maintain wind across the eastern parts of South Wales. That also includes parts of the ACT. Damaging winds possible also about the coastal areas and the ranges of Victoria. I've also got damaging wind warnings about the far northeast of Tasmania. This broader area is for the potential of heavy rainfall as well. Sorry, I've got that round the wrong way. Heavy rainfall for the far northeast, widespread severe wind warning. We are expecting to see that heavy rainfall pushing down the east coast of Tasmania tomorrow. So we will see that flood watch extending down into those eastern areas. And we're also looking at very strong winds continuing across the southeastern states. With slow ease off on Saturday. Snow levels will begin to rise during tomorrow afternoon, and they should totally clear by Saturday as well. We've also got some unsettled conditions through the southwest of Western Australia. Showers and thunderstorms are possible in Perth. They're a lot more likely, though, further south and over the inland. Through the southeast, very strong and gusty conditions, including Sydney and also the Hunter Valley, where we have those bushfires at the moment.
The top stories on ABC News. The Prime Minister has proposed new laws to make it easier to strip Australian citizenship from those convicted of terrorism offences. Under current laws, the federal government can only strip citizenship from people who've been sentenced to at least 6 years jail. Scott Morrison will introduce legislation so citizenship can be taken from anyone convicted of terrorism offences. Under the changes, the government would only need to be reasonably satisfied the person is eligible for citizenship of another country. Federal Labor has launched a new energy policy spending billions of dollars in renewable power. Labor will also revive the National Energy Guarantee cast aside by the Turnbull government. The coalition has criticised the announcement, saying Labor's 45% emission reduction targets will cost jobs. Supporters of David Eastman say justice has been done after he was found not guilty of murdering one of Australia's top cops nearly 30 years ago. The first trial found Mr Eastman guilty of shooting AFP officer Colin Winchester in 1989. He spent 19 years in jail. Today, a jury delivered a not guilty verdict in a 6-month retrial. And the Bureau of Meteorology says a dust haze will remain over Sydney for the rest of the afternoon. Health authorities are warning about the health risks of dust storms, particularly for people with respiratory conditions. The Office of Environment and Heritage has issued a very poor air quality warning over eastern parts of the state. Well, now on the Eastman verdict, and for nearly 30 years, Canberrans have pondered the question, who killed Colin Winchester? For many, the city's history is marked by events before the Winchester murder and then all that happened after. Elizabeth Byrne has been following the long-running case and takes a look back at how the crime unfolded.
David Eastman was in the frame from the start. His arrest would not happen for years, but on the day of the killing, there was only shock.
But for a senior police officer to be assassinated in the haven of his own home, in the driveway, off duty, is a new element in Australian criminal annals. And for that reason, every resource has to be mustered to deal with it quickly.
I've known him as a friendly colleague for 25 years.
How are the other people taking it in the force? Fairly stunned?
Much the same as I am, upset.
Canberra's police threw everything at the investigation.
The position of the shells indicates that the offender was outside the car. First shot was fired from behind the Assistant Commissioner at close range, and the second from the side through the open door of the vehicle.
The entire suburb was door-knocked and hundreds interviewed in the followed.
We are very shocked about it, and you just think those things can happen to you.
Well, it's terrible. I mean, it's not only do I deplore it close to home, I deplore it anywhere. I mean, it's a change in the Australian way of life, really. I mean, this sort of thing isn't Australia, is it?
It was a difficult investigation from the start, with tensions between forensic officers and investigators, even at the crime scene on the night of the shooting. But police were stumped. A reward was posted offering $250,000 and protection. And police targeted Ruger 22 owners in a bid to identify the gun. Police attention was quickly on David Eastman.
I initially thought it was a drug raid, so they just swooped in, shortly after 9, they just swooped in.
And with the police came others.
David, it's Naomi Beasley from ABC Television. We're interested in talking to you now. If you'd like to come and talk to us.
The national media honed in on the mafia angle. The story about Colin Winchester's role in a drug investigation into 2 crops near Bungendore outside Canberra even sparked a TV drama. The theory was that mafia bosses believed they were paying Colin Winchester for protection and felt when they realised it was a trap. But David Eastman was the one who went on trial. He'd been identified in the coronial hearings, and the media interest intensified. Rod Campbell from the Canberra Times eventually wrote a book.
There was a meeting between Eastman and Winchester
over a minor assault matter, and Eastman was trying to get the charges dropped. This was about a month before the murder. The meeting didn't go terribly well.
It's the so-called honoured
Masters.
I spoke to Eastman. He's a very, very difficult person to deal with, and I found, just like the federal police, I suppose, that he was essentially unwilling to cooperate.
It took 6 years and a chaotic trial before Mr. Eastman was finally convicted and sentenced to life. It would take nearly 20 years and countless legal bids before he was freed, when an inquiry declared there'd been a miscarriage of justice.
He is relieved finally to be exonerated and to regain his freedom after 19 years.
The forensic evidence used to convict him had been discredited, but the police and prosecutors weren't done yet, and there was no escaping the inevitable. A new trial going over old ground with a completely circumstantial case. David Eastman made his daily trip to and from the court to hear the case against him. But now the verdict is in, questions still linger in minds over who really did kill Colin Winchester. Elizabeth Byrne, ABC News, Canberra.
More now on the fire emergencies in New South Wales. New South Wales Rural Fire Service has issued a second emergency warning for an out-of-control blaze, this time at Weston near Kurri Kurri. The fire is burning in the area of Hospital Road. It's moving in a southeasterly direction, and of course it follows the other emergency warning declared by the New South Wales Rural Fire Service less than half an hour ago. A fire at Saltash, about 45 kilometres away. A short time ago, we spoke to Greg Allen, service, who said for people blaze it was too late to shelter in place. Severe weather conditions in the area this afternoon with wind gusts in excess of 80 kilometres an hour. We will keep you updated on both of these blazes throughout the afternoon. But now we're going to go back to the Victorian election campaign, where the Premier and the are making their final pitches to voters 2 days ahead of Saturday's vote. State political reporter Richard Willingham joins us now from Melbourne. Good afternoon to you, Richard. Release things first to the government. What has it had to say?
Well, good afternoon. You're right. Sleeps to go is political. No other states can be governed for the next 4 years. Important step today from both sides releasing their election costings. Now, Labor first up with them. They've made